In this video I want to discuss something of the mechanics and science of pushing. You see lots of people pushing in videos in push hands. You see very little explanation of the actual mechanics of how you would do that, or where you do see explanations it can be a bit esoteric and it's not to everyone's taste to have it explained in that way. So I'm going to explain things in a much more mechanical and down to earth way, which I hope is useful to someone. When I say pushing in this case, I mean generally pushing a whole person. For example, rather than just pushing an arm out of the way, then push the person. That's the kind of pushing I'm talking about. In a self-defense scenario, maybe you'll push someone into someone else or into a wall or over a table. In sport, push someone to create some distance. I mean, there's no argument that sometimes you just push someone and it's meaningless. They just go back a bit, maybe into a more comfortable range for them, kicking range. So, but that's one of the aspects of the science of pushing it. You have to consider why you're doing it and so on. Okay, there are three basic kinds of pushing. The first kind is you occasionally see people do this, feet in line this way, all your weight leaning forward and pushing on someone like this, and then pushing this way. That's an indication of an immature and inexperienced person trying to do push hands or pushing. Similarly, if you let someone do that to you, I mean, it shouldn't really take any... First of all, it shouldn't take any serious explaining that that's wrong, although there are exceptions to every rule, of course, and there are times where you might find yourself doing that. But if you see someone doing it regularly, in a push hands environment, you know that's a sign of someone who hasn't really trained push hands properly. And if someone lets them do it, that's a sign that they're not very well trained in push hands. Because it shouldn't take much explanation to say that it's quite easy just to move out of the way and make them fall, or just move their arms this way. The second way of pushing is what we call a brace, where the back leg goes and then you push this way, kind of the way you would push a car. So I know myself from my own experience that you practice like you do your standing pole, and then you practice pushing this way. But then when you come to try it on a bag, you find yourself going and doing it this way. I'm sure lots of other people have had that experience, because there's a big difference between pushing air and pushing an object. And even then, when you come to do it with a person in push hands and then in sparring, it all goes up in degrees of difficulty. Well, the first thing is, of course, once you've got the ability to release energy this way, to start getting rid of this brace this brace way of pushing. That way of pushing isn't redundant, as we'll see in a minute. It comes back into play in other scenarios. But what you're after, first of all, is the ability just to release force in one direction this way, as you can see in my pushing demonstration video, where I'm pushing a heavier bag than this. And the bag doesn't have to be all that heavy. It doesn't have to be as heavy as a person, because what you're trying to do is push someone, the top part of their body over their midsection, and overbalance them. So you're trying to push someone the way that they're off balance, like diagonal this way or forward this way. So the bag doesn't have to be a really, really heavy bag. You just have to get the feeling for how to push someone in the right direction. So the way you get this kind of release force forward, or indeed backwards, or any direction. Obviously, first of all, you practice with your standing pole and you play with the feeling a bit, and then this kind of feeling, and you practice this way. And once you've kind of got that, you can move on to a bag, and there ain't no way but the hard way. You've just got to practice. Maybe just catch the feeling at first. I'm not going to do it full power on this. You can see it on my other video on a bigger bag. And you just practice catching the feeling this way. And it's a very similar posture, if you hit with this part of your body or your shoulder or anything going forward in this way. But normally what you want is you just want to feel someone's off balance, and then just push and release energy very quickly, very fast, and it's more powerful to just release this way when you get the feeling than it is to do that. So what you're after ultimately is like when you're sparring or fighting and you just see someone's off balance and you can just push them, hopefully push them over, but if not, just push them off balance and keep pushing. So that's why you just want the instant this way rather than this way. So what you'll tend to find next, and what I found was quite tense. Once you get this, once you can actually do the push on an object, tense in your shoulders, and you begin to realise one of the reasons why you practice standing pole and why you play with the feeling and try and get the relaxation in the movement. And it's not something really, because it's a feeling, it's very difficult to teach someone. Like with a lot of this kind of stuff I've found myself, you just train and unfold it, you just think about it, and every so often you do one like that's more powerful than the others. You think, that was it, I relaxed more with that one, and you just get the feeling better, so then you try and catch that feeling, and I relax more. So what I would recommend is, for one, doing just loads and loads and loads of practice. Really part of your regular pound, 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 and just trying to relax the shoulders as you push in, and just catch the feeling. And obviously you're not floppy and you're not completely relaxed at all points. It's like a dialectic. It's opposites working together to just in the right proportions at the right moments, and just at the right moment you relax. Just as you hit, you just tense in the right way. And of course, push from your back leg, and this foot goes forward. And then another thing to say about this is not to overdo this, because you could easily slip this way. Slippy floor, being on the floor, grass, mud, and also don't put all your weight on that. Like when you make this kind of posture, actually still most of your weight's on the back leg. It's just allowing a release, like a very short release of all your body weight forwards into the target. The same principle applies, for example, when you hit with your forearm this way. It's a similar movement. The shoulder barge is very similar. I tell you what, the shoulder barge is a real danger of overdoing the step this way and just overbalancing with it when you do it full contact on a big bag. It's just those kind of things that you discover with experience and with extensive practice. And one thing I would say is do not rely on just doing it on the air like this. You must hit an object, and then you must take it up into push hands, and then you must take it up into sparring. Otherwise it becomes kind of meaningless. I think the real telling point for you is when you come to actually do it against an object, and if you have an experience like when you start doing this, God, how do I make it work against an object? And a bag's are very good. A heavier bag is more preferable, like the one I use at the gym that I go to. It's a really good testing apparatus, like in a way that you can't really just keep hitting a person, because you can't treat them like a bag and just keep hitting them. But it's a really useful way of testing your ability and improving it and thinking about it and how did that work and catching the feeling correctly. So of course there are times when you are quite static and you can just push this way. There are times you see lots of videos on YouTube, and you've probably been in situations like this yourself. I know I have, where someone pushes you and you push back, and you have a bit of push and shove. And you also see lots of times where someone walks up like this, and someone's just stood there. And very often you see people just stand there and get hit because they don't realise the moment that person started walking towards them, you're in a fight. So there are times where you can just static, off the spot, push. And of course your basic practice is just off the spot. And I should also say, when you're doing your basic practice, think like standing pole. Just relax, try and relax into the standing pole feeling, and then release energy and just relaxing. I found that's the best way to get those golden ones where they're much more powerful than the others, and you realise, you know, your body has much more potential to release force than you thought. So yeah, practice off the spot, and also practice with your hands down for those moments where, you know, someone's giving you, you know, and you push. And of course, at a more advanced level, when you move up a bit, mostly when I'm training now, I don't just release it. You know, I push and then go for the punch, or, you know, push and then in with the elbow. Everything's leading into something else in more advanced levels of training as you move up the pyramid. But you also have to think that most of the time you're not static like that. So the next level of complexity is moving around with it and then pushing this way. Which just adds another dimension of difficulty to it, but your training should be like this. As you kind of 90% improve in one thing, then you start thinking, oh, how do I take this up to the next level? Because that last 10% improvement generally is improved by moving on to the next level, and that catches you up that way. So you move around from this static posture, you generally switch to this in the way you step in. I mean, you practice both, just moving and then releasing them. But from more of a distance, you just see someone's a little bit off balance and steam in and push this way. So starting to move around with it and then stepping is like your next level of difficulty in pushing. Right, so this basic kind of way you releasing energy forwards, itself breaks down into two different kinds of ways of pushing. And the first way is just like the release energy, where there's a distance between the limb and the object, and you just, very much like if you were just striking someone, and release energy that way. But if your hands are on the object, it's a different body mechanic, it's a slightly different way of doing it. So it may occur to you as you're practicing this way, well, what if I'm doing push on and then I put my hands on someone, and then I want to push them from my hands on. This is where, like a bag like this that's too light can be deceptive, because you can almost do it the same way and push, but with a heavier bag or a person you find it's very difficult to do. So there's a slightly different way of doing it, and basically you just take the weight, you just brace a little bit, take the weight and then push. So it's much easier to feel it on a heavy bag, a much heavier bag, because you have to do it. And again, you can see me doing it on the other video. Every time I do it with my hands on the bag, I'm doing this brace, and then, but the bracing actually takes place in a split second. It's the same amount of time as for my hands to travel this distance. It takes precisely that amount of time really to brace and push. You know. So you just take it, and what you do is you just kind of you don't relax, you don't go floppy, you just kind of coil a little bit and just take, so there you just feel the weight of it against you, and then you can push this way. And again, it's very difficult to explain, but as you come to do it yourself on a heavier bag, you will feel the difference in doing it. And similarly, you then need to, you'll be moving and then touch them, and then go Because what you want again is like when you're sparring or doing pushing, where as soon as you touch, release, or if you're actually touching for a while and then you want to, brace and then release energy. So again, you just practice it like all the others. Take it up different levels each time, from static on the spot to moving, stepping in this way and from this way. Then at a higher level, you can fuse these two. You can hit and then just keep in contact. Instead of this way, just pushing off this way, you can just keep in contact a little bit longer so that you are actually bracing mid-push and then push with more force into it. And again, it's very difficult to explain a feeling, a physical feeling in this way, but if you can get both the basic kind of ways of pushing, you can then fuse them into one way. You just keep in contact a little bit longer and then release with much more force, and that's from my experience so far, the most powerful way of releasing force. So when you come to push a bag, you shouldn't just think, oh well, a bag won't hit me back, I don't have to do anything else. In keeping with the idea of professionalisation, you should be thinking that if someone's pushed, they could easily just, and probably their reactions will be to lift their arms this way, they could easily just catch you in the face. And you might not push them back, and you're quite exposed this way. So there's two things that are wrong that I see all the time, and that's where people do this and your hands really drop. You should not say necessarily bring them back, but if you look on the other video of pushing demonstration, I've done pretty much every time I push, I bring my hands back into this position, and the rationale for that is, number one, you shouldn't fetishise this big wide Yiquan style guard, because it doesn't guard your head enough, with the shoulders down. Actually, most of the time, your guard should be covering your head and your shoulders should be up. Covering your chin, and then when you strike, you can relax into the shot mode, because otherwise you're going to get smacked upside the head more times than you would like. And similarly when you push, I like to push and come back and cover, just because you may only push someone that far. You need to think about safety and defence. So generally I train when I push, cover this way. So obviously the first thing to say is you don't always want to release energy or push forwards, which is interesting. When you think of like Bruce Lee saying, have your strongest weapon forward, no criticism of Master Bruce whatsoever, but just a technical point is that there's no way of knowing which way is forward. There's no way of saying your opponent is necessarily going to be there. One may be, but one may be there. So that becomes your forward, or maybe someone's behind you and you need to hit back. So there is no forward really. So you may need to push in multiple directions. So that's why you practice barges and this kind of forearm, which is very useful for, if you can get it on the neck and push this way, is a really useful technique. Especially push on, it's quite easy. Pull back on the head and push on the neck this way. And you can do it like in self-defense, like hit in with the forearm into the neck and push this way, just push the whole body back this way. So when you start moving around, something that will occur to you is someone isn't always flat like this, and you can just push them over like that if they're standing flat with their feet together. And it's really easy, and a kid can push you back doing that. And one of the ways around that is, like similarly, if you this way and someone pushes you, is to curve your body a bit and release some energy forward. this way into the push and resist it. Similarly, if your feet are flat, you can try doing that, and maybe you'll be lucky and you won't go flying too much. But generally, as you're moving around, you should be thinking, well, what if my opponent is mirroring me? What if his body is on an angle like that? So if I do this hand is on his shoulder, but this hand isn't on his body because he's at an angle. So really, for me to push him, I need to either push him with one hand this way, which of course you will have been practicing, and when you practice that posture, also imagine pulling his arm this way and palm striking this way. But if you want to push with both hands on this, you're going to need to move yourself around the opponent. So all of a sudden this bracing posture comes back into play. So anyway, this brace comes back in a way, a kind of brace and then release forward, for you to go round the opponent this way. Something you need to think of. I mean, it's like you'd never think of it hitting a bag. It'd have to happen to you in real life for you to think about, for someone to tell you. If my opponent stood here and I go this way and I push him over, or even back, and he lifts his leg this way, well, his front leg is only here, and it'll lift right into my groin area, into my private area. So you need to actually do more of a step this way, and it's a posture that you need to practice to get the feeling of, especially to make it work, and maybe keep moving that way round to avoid that. So on a more advanced level, you then find you want to move maybe backwards and forward. You don't just want to push forwards, you want to, for example, you want to pull in and then push this way. You know, your arm goes on someone's neck and you pull them and then push them this way. Or in a slightly different way, like you might move their arms this way or pull back and then push. And also should reiterate something I've said on another video, is when you pull back, you shouldn't lean back this way. Because you just go off balance that way. So if someone's quite good and you pull them this way and they just keep going with it and push you could be in trouble. But the point here is you want to move in more than one direction. You want to go back and then go forward. So what I'm getting at is the next level of training is things like, you know, pulling this way and then release this way, or push to the side and then pull back. You know, hands around the neck, or you know, pull in and then pull in, shoulder. So releasing energy in different directions, and that's why you see on the Thr3TreeBase video that I do, most of them are for like when your arms are touching, you move their arms one way and then release energy the other way. So that's a much more complicated use of pushing and Thr3TreeBase, other than just this way. You know, let's say for example you pull their arms down and then have to change this way, so if energy comes back, energy goes forward.